Hello, welcome for my second part of my playthrough of Elden Ring. Still being stuck somewhere in the wild. So, I talked already last time a little bit about my take on getting off-road in Elden Ring. And I think there's great virtue in experiencing the game and just having fun. And I think this is probably the biggest charm and the biggest change Elden Ring has from past FromSoftware games, especially Dark Souls. But I think there's also a huge risk in getting kind of lost and losing your runes somewhere off-road and then having to backtrack there to get that kind of sucks. So it's also plenty inefficient. So I was considering about streaming my gameplay. I made a video 2 weeks ago, and I was thinking that I would stream my gameplay, but then chose to not do it as I just wanted to immerse myself, wanted to enjoy the game unhindered and without constantly thinking about having a camera in front of my face. And playing the game, I recorded a lot. Actually, later parts I also just forgot to record myself. If this gameplay were not sped up, I think possibly be not that entertaining. So personally, I'm not a huge fan of speedruns, but aside from playing a game, just sitting back and consuming and watching gameplay. Just watching someone play. I think speedruns are way more enjoyable probably than someone looking behind every corner and trying to find any item, as that drags out the whole gameplay, right? That no one really has time to watch hours and hours of gameplay, someone creeping around, dying 4, 5, 6 times to the same boss. And so I think the whole appeal of a speedrun is that it's mind-boggling to see someone beat these huge games in crazy times, like 30, 40 minutes. But also it's way more condensed, allowing you actually to experience and see the whole game in such a short time. So it's way more condensed and thus way more entertaining. So that's why I chose against live streaming my gameplay currently. I said that's not my play style. I'm the type. I look behind every bush. I occasionally slaughter a pig here and there. I can't let the animals in peace. And as you can see, at that point in the game I hadn't made up my mind yet where to go, what to do. I think it's one of the biggest advantages of the game. Being open world makes it possible for you as a player to steamroll through the game, get late game weapons and armor, more so weapons quite early. Also what makes these ridiculous speedruns possible. Speedruns of a game that, due to its nature being open world, seem unthinkable at first, but it's this openness which allows you to just push through and push into late game areas from the start of the game. But also the risk is for anyone who's not really into speedrunning and who's not an experienced player of the game, let alone the previous games of FromSoftware. There is the risk of getting lost in an area that is not intended for early gamers, for under-level characters.
You're tarnished. I can see it. And I can also see that you're not
So
after
an approach
my
I
throat.
take is,
Then
when I
why
try to
purchasing
find
from something
when I find a
can't?
vendor, I look out for rare items, not so much for consumables, like in this case. Items that are usually indicated by being only possible to be bought once. So, indicated by there being a limitation, not by how many items a vendor sells, but by how many items you can hold. And if the maximum is one, that clearly indicates that it's
I am of a nomadic selling wares as I
key item
has been its only tarnished. Let's say you're
or something
goodbye.
akin, something that you won't get any replicates later on in the game. And like I said in my previous video, I slowed down
Greetings,
the
traveler from
playback
beyond
speed
the fog.
to regular playback speed.
I am Melina.
So, this gameplay is full-blown spoiler. no more warnings. And also people speaking in the games. Usually
I offer you an accord.
it's quite weird. Like,
Have you heard of the Finger Maidens?
I think for gameplay,
They serve the two fingers,
just regular gameplay,
offering
it doesn't
guidance
affect it as much, but
and aid to the tarnished.
spoken parts
But you, I am
sped
afraid,
up just
are maidenless.
due to the distortion of speeding up or slowing
I can play
down.
the role of maiden,
Sounds awful, so I keep
turning
these
wounds
parts at
into
regular
strength.
speeds.
to aid you in your search for the Elden Ring. You need only take me with you to the foot of the Erd Tree. Then it's settled. Summon me by grace to turn runes. Another matter. I bequeath to you
And this is the
ring.
point in the game where access is granted to the
Use it
to the
It will
mount.
summon a torrent. Treat him with respect.
I don't even know what kind of animal is supposed to represent some horse yak
Shall I
hybrid.
turn you? Let my share them with me.
Your thoughts, your ambition.
I said in a previous video that I wasn't too amazed by the design. It was okayish, I thought, but actually I think it's kind of plain and fits any character look, and I came to really appreciate the design. I think it fits greatly into the setting of the game, but not out of being reluctant, but more because I wanted to really explore the game on foot. I refrained from using the horse, the mount, and I think I didn't even try out the mount for like my first 4 or 5 hours of the game, so which also adds to this being extremely slow, like me approaching everything extremely slow and trying everything out. And another thing, I'm one of these FOMO guys, not homo, FOMO, F-O-M-O, which stands for fear of missing out, F-O-M-O, fear of missing out. So if there's a split in the road, I'm thinking about which one does not lead me to the goal. Which one is the one that does not finish the main quest first. Like, if I were trapped in a labyrinth, I'd always choose the route which does not lead me to the exit. I choose the route which might possibly net me some hidden items. Yeah, so I couldn't make up my mind at this point whether to enter the cave or not. And I walked in and out, and then I chose to walk in. At this point I also wasn't so sure about the level and the difficulty, how it scales to a beginner character. Even though I think I'm not a bad player, I'm not super skilled at that game. It's a new game for me too. But yeah, I thought I'm not bad. But still, this game, like I said, due to its open world nature, offers the possibility for players to get into fights, into areas that are not intended for under-leveled characters. Or at least not for beginner, first-timer, under-leveled characters. Casual players that just want to enjoy the game. Which absolutely applies to me as well, at least in my first playthrough. Yeah, and there's a boss gate. A fog gate. And knowing that there's a boss made me a bit reluctant. Also something I talked about in the previous video. Something that got me into huge rage was I had the feeling my rolls were lagging. And specifically my rolls. Not so much anything else like strides, walking. I didn't know if it was due to my controller lagging or my connection or what part of the game experience caused this lag. And I found out by reading comment sections on a blog, and as opposed to many other games, the roll does not get triggered. Click of the button every single release button due to both running and dodging reaction in one button. So this can actually cause the roll to be significantly delayed if you hold the button, like push and release, push, release, but don't hold it long enough for it to be registered as sprinting. So the game will not assume that you're intending your character to go for a sprint, but for a roll, but the push is long enough for it to be severely delayed. So that means that you as a player, and most of all I as a player, had to change my muscle memory. So instead of going for like a tight, like tightening up and pushing the button when trying to roll, just going for a soft, swift click. Something that I'm a huge fan of, and that I use the most in my early hours of the game is the sneaking. I think this is just huge. I think it changes how to approach big groups, and there are quite big groups of enemies and get circled by enemies. So, me not knowing the map and the game very well, I pretty much ignored the sight, the glowing, yellowish glowing spot in the distance, the sparkles looking like small fireflies guiding towards it. I totally ignored that. I think I made myself my first few hours of the game unnecessarily difficult. Something that I changed quickly is when exploring new terrain, new areas, really prioritizing my search for sites, the saving spots where you can rest, level up, and that you can spawn from when you die. So in later hours of the game, I changed my approach when exploring. Like I said, looking out for the sites, and I tried to develop kind of like a far side. I also used the horse, the mount, way more. So just sticking sticking to riding the mount in a slightly zigzag course, always keeping an eye on the horizon and looking out for the light streams, so firefly-like streams, guiding towards new sites. And this makes travel much faster. This makes it much easier to find new locations. But I can't say I didn't have fun, of course. I played the way I played because that was me just enjoying the game. Something that I kind of lament, that I was not so happy with, even though it's an open world game, I felt there was not an awful lot of equipment to choose from. A few weapons here and there, but enemies have pretty low drop rates, and weapons you find on the way are scarcity 2. Scarcity. And armor, new armor, I felt is almost non-existent. These basic infantry guys dropped some armor, but pretty standard armor, not a great one. And one might say, yeah, this is the beginning of the game, but I felt older games gave way more and much earlier access to different armor. So I felt my starting equipment was my only option, or my only viable option. So I stuck to my starting gear for a long time. And in my last video I talked about the importance of choosing the correct starting class, which I said is mostly irrelevant probably, unless you're min-maxing for competitive online play, due to your levels being allocated into certain stats, possibly making a huge difference, like when you have 16 phase instead of 8, and 14 and or 12 instead of 10 or 8 in another stat, resulting in 10 to 12 stats being 10 to 12 levels being invested into the wrong stat, which even around level 110 to 20 to possibly 50 is still quite a lot. And with the cost for leveling up increasing with each level up, 10 levels in the wrong stat, in an unnecessary stat that does not fit your build, is still quite a lot. And it might shift you out of range for your targeted level where you wanna match up with other people, friendly or as an invader. But rethinking that statement that the starting class is mostly irrelevant, now that I see this gameplay one more time and talking about how long I've been stuck to my starting gear, or at least it feels like that, I think it's probably not that irrelevant, as good gear is only found not mid-game, but if you're not using a guide and you're not exploring specifically certain areas, yeah, might only be accessible mid-game. Yeah. So that said, the starting class might actually be more important than I stated in my previous video, in the first part of my playthrough. So anyone who hasn't played the game yet or is not into the game yet, thinking about buying the game, or anyone who's just a new player thinking about starting a second character, I think I would change my position regarding the relevant changing characters. I would say yes, you should pick your starting class wisely. So as you see, I found some weapons, but a few of them have a red X. They're strength weapons, so they're just not usable for me. I found a standard straight sword, which is not that great, and I found a great sword, which is decent, and I think it's the most viable weapon that I found. And due to me just liking great swords and katanas being probably the swords that I gravitate most towards, this was the first weapon that seemed like an alternative to my starting katana.
This tiny golden aura is the grace of the Erd Tree. This light once shone in the eyes of your tarnished brethren, but now it is all that guides you. Or so I hear. You can see them, can't you? The rays of grace that guide you through your... Upon the cliff,
So
in Castle Stormveil, a demigod.
the first
who
big challenge in the
inherited a
game
fragment. If the rays
is
of grace signal
the Storm
castle,
Castle.
then the Elden Ring beckons you. As an ally
And
by pact, I pray that you are
this
fit
road was actually
to
pretty
face the
difficult.
challenge presented. by the ring.
The small enemies left and right are just fodder, but the giant troll is actually pretty difficult. So for those giants, for those trolls, I think the most viable strategy is heavy attacks. Charged heavy attacks. Usually 2 charged heavy attacks against the leg. If you can possibly time them together, are usually enough to break the stance, get them into a broken state. Apply a critical strike, a critical hit, which is devastating against most enemies. So, me thinking I was super I needed that enemy. But at the cost of having no healing flasks. So, and even so, the other enemies here are just fodder, left and right, without any healing flasks. Yeah. Still a hard challenge. Which is why on later runs I chose to just run up, dash up. Sometimes running through is actually a viable option in Elden Ring. Running with the tail between the legs. Those guys are quite annoying as they inform other enemies and make other enemies more hostile, more aggressive. So, maybe you've noticed in the background, you can see another side, the yellow glow. There you can see it again, behind the bushes, behind the trees. This is something that at this point in the game I was just not looking out for yet, and I would say this is probably the #1 thing people should do when exploring. Using the mount, staying on or close to the main roads. Many of the sites are located next to the main road. And then exploring off from these sites is probably the best way to engage the game. Dogs in previous Souls games have been a complete pest. I think there are lots of jokes and memes online with Miyazaki, creator of the Souls series, folding his hands, and there's like a statement written in the picture, like the devs asking like, what can we do to the next Souls game, and Miyazaki being like, let's add more dogs. So dogs are a huge pain in the ass in most Souls games, as they're super agile, jump around, and usually attack in packs. Wolves in Elden Ring take on a similar role as dogs in previous games, but I find them way more bearable. They sometimes act similar once they start attacking as a pack specifically. They can be quite unpredictable, but wolves in Elden Ring have a habit of just lying around, just being on their belly, and it's quite possible to just dash in and take them out with a few strikes. So, wolves in Elden Ring far less annoying than dogs in previous games.
Everyone's been grafted. Everyone who came
And
with me.
here I found this NPC,
Across the sea for me, they fought.
and
For me.
she gives
Only to have their arms taken,
not any
their legs
story,
taken, even their heads
driving
taken and stuck to the
information.
spider.
She doesn't
Did
give
you know
any
if you're
important,
grafted by
useful
the
information.
You become a chrysalid. It's quite
And
a lark
each time
when
I
you
talked
think
to her,
about
she
it.
didn't reveal much, but just added some sentences, some dialogue.
You're all on your own, are
But
you? And heading to
in many
Stormvale
of these
Castle?
games, when finding an
And
NPC,
wow, that makes us two peas
it
in a
is-
pod. But I don't have
it
your
is
courage.
advisable, I think,
It's
to
scary, you know, having
talk
your
to
arms
them
cut off,
as
legs,
long
or
as
your head.
each
I
new
want to be like everyone else, but I'm just
approach
too scared. I'm nothing but a craven.
adds new dialogue, new conversation, new
Oh, I know. Can
new
you take
words.
this little one along with you?
So
The poor thing deserves someone. And
I would always try to exhaust all the dialogue. Keep clicking, keep talking,
It was a pleasure
keep
to
talking
come.
to them,
Tell them I love them finally getting that.
so they don't have anything new to say. And with that NPC, I think it paid off. She gave me some spirit ash, the jellyfish, and I wanna use this moment to talk about the spirit ashes. So a lot of things in the game, in Elden Ring, are deemed OP, overpowered by now, and there are tons of YouTube videos about magic overpowered, haste is overpowered, this blade is overpowered, this spell is overpowered, bleed is overpowered, frost is overpowered. Like hell, like everything seems to be overpowered, and in the end everything's balanced, so what? I think it's childish that after just a week people are like, please From, nerf this, it's too hard, it's too difficult, like, come on guys, like, there isn't even all the information out yet on the wiki, and people still discover new things, so we don't really know yet how things balance out against other things. So yeah, there are quite a few things that are a bit overpowered, and there are probably some bugs. Some bugs have been discovered. Some things might be intentional, some things not. And I'm sure some things will get tweaked, maybe nerfed in the future. But actually, I'm enjoying the game so much. I don't hope for a lot of things to get nerfed. And one thing that is sometimes pointed out as being overpowered are ashes. There are some people who go even so far as saying like, oh yeah, if you don't beat the game like raw, like vanilla, you didn't beat the game really. Like summoning other players, you didn't beat the game. Using magic, oh, you didn't beat the game. Oh, you healed, you didn't beat the game. Like, come on, it's a gameplay mechanic that is clearly built in to balance the difficulty. It's not a game journalist mode, it's just part of the usual difficulty, and I think the difficulty is always adjusted in a way to expect you to make use of the tools that you have at your disposal, and your ashes, your spirit ashes, are absolutely a part of it. I think spirit ashes are extremely viable in Elden Ring, as they give you the support without the penalties that inviting another player into your game would add. So if you call for support from other players, specifically bosses, will have a multiplier to their health pool. And I don't know if it's the same like in previous games, they might also have a multiplier to their stagger, to their poise, being harder to get staggered and being harder to be brought into a staggered state, opened up for criticals, and also more resistance to status effects like leech. So with that in mind, this has always been a thing also in previous games and previous FromSoftware games, that some bosses that have very predictable, very methodic patterns that you can kind of practice, where fighting these bosses is like playing a rhythm game, where you know it's always like you can bait them into specific attacks, where it's like left swing, right swing, and right sweeping swing, where you know like you can stick to one spot, you gotta roll through the second attack, and then you can easily block the third one, and then you're free for 2-3 attacks with your weapon, and you can repeat and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. So with that, you being a single player playing the game kind of offline, a single player experience against certain bosses made it a lot easier, as opposed to inviting someone to help you, as that made the pattern of the boss way more predictable and the health pool smaller, making it in the end paradoxically easier to fight certain bosses solo as with health. So it's not like playing the game on solo is always the hard mode, and inviting friends or someone to help you is like easy mode. It might sometimes not pay off, at least with a single support being called. But with Phantom Ashes, that's not even the issue, and I think they open up a lot of possibilities, and especially the first ash you get in the game, the wolf ash, which makes it able for you to summon 3 wolves, and also they are individually not strong, especially on their base level, and against bosses. Each of the wolves goes usually down after a few hits. But this first ash, even though it's not so useful in dishing out damage, due to it being 3 wolves that that pretty much just add to your attacks, they are capable of staggering smaller human-sized enemies and bosses. Not so much the bulky, enormous, tanky enemies, but anything that's human-sized, similar to your character. Anything that can get staggered by lightweight weapons will also get staggered by the wolves, usually every time the wolves attack, by each and every attack, making it possible to keep some enemies, even bosses, in a constant stagger. So, I think the right ashes, and that goes for the wolves, can make a lot of encounters a lot easier.
Someone must extinguish thy flame.
This being the first big boss, Murgot,
Market the fell.
and I tried to take him on with an NPC summon. My character was under-leveled. I had base level equipment, non-upgraded. Not too many stats to this character. The stats that deal damage, vitality, life. I didn't know a lot of game mechanics yet. I missed out on a critical a moment ago. I didn't know the boss patterns. I wasn't used to the pace and the mechanics yet. I would say my every reaction was pretty off. So I was actually surprised that I got this boss down to so much or so little health. And the reason I got this boss down that much was probably primarily to make people believe I talked a few minutes ago about what the community, whatnot, everything is deemed OP, and I wouldn't say OP, but bleed and status effects like bleed, frost, also sleep as it seems, and scarlet rot are extremely powerful, extremely useful in this game. And while status effects were more gimmicky thing last game, especially against bosses. In this game, it's really useful, really helpful, really effective. So happy physical controls, especially strength, just pure dex was also quite versatile. And well, magic has always been also OP, so the most OP builds in the past Souls games have always been a pure strength build, pure dex build, and pure infinite build. I think for most were probably strength and int. Each as
Very
dedicated
well.
builds,
Let my hand
and the rest of the
upon you.
stats just put into vitality and anything that boosts survival. And you being able to be tanky and put on some gear. So I think later games, especially Dark Souls 2 and 3, but also Bloodborne made magic and fire and lightning way more versatile, way more usable, as they made these elements to scale and making it possible to work with innate elemental damage and buffs, and these ability scaling, making it possible to
I can't remember the last time a new
have strong
TARDIS made their
elemental
way
builds.
to the round table. Very well.
but still
As your senior,
the status effects like
I bid you
poison
welcome.
and
It is
bleed
safe here.
were
You
pretty
may let
niche
down your guard.
in the past, and I feel
Allow me a word of advice.
Elden Ring
As
is
your
doing
senior,
doing
you
it just.
are a mere visitor
doing
to the
these-
round table. Nothing more.
It's doing it
A
these
house guest. Yet to earn their keep.
these effects
Remember your
just
place,
by
newcomer.
making them way more pivotal to the
There's nothing left to
gameplay.
say.
Ah, hello. You must be new here. Well, just call me Dialos. The honor of one's
So I think
house holds
the
little
most-
import in these lands.
The generally
Have you met
most
a young woman named
usable-
Anya on your travels? She's my servant, but fickle as the wind. Take your eyes off her for but a
Status
moment and she's
effect.
good as gone. If you find her,
is bleed,
please be sure to...
probably. As with many bleed weapons, it takes a few hits, but it's possible to trigger the blood loss quite consistently, especially with two weapons that are capable of causing bleeding, dual wielded. And by the way, again diverging, dual wielding has been nicely implemented into Elden Ring. I was happy when I saw it making a return since Dark Souls 2, but I think they implemented it in a way better way than ever in the past. But yeah, especially with, like, let's say dual wielding two bleed causing weapons, you can trigger the bleed effect quite quickly, quite consistently. And each time the effect is triggered, a fixed percentage of the health is taken off, which is especially useful against bosses and enemies with a huge health pool, as regardless of how strong your weapon is and how high your total damage is with just your strikes, the bleeding on top, which is always percentage based, will take off a bigger chunk of bosses and enemies with a large pool than just the damage you could do with your weapon, regular damage. While Rust seems not as applicable as Bleed, as Bleed once triggered causes a blood loss, damage, a fixed percentage damage and is no longer present as a status on the enemy. So it can be just triggered once the meter fills the triggers and the meter gets reset to 0. So it can be repeatedly triggered again and again and again. but Frost, once triggered, enemies and also your character holds on to the Frost, meaning you can't really trigger it. So that makes it less viable at first sight than Bleed. But the key point about freezing is that as long as a character and also an enemy is frozen, all damage reduction and all defenses are reduced, making it so that you cause more damage, but also making it so that the character or the enemy has lowered resistance against all other status ailments, including bleed, making these two go nicely hand in hand. So, I hope you liked this recording of my gameplay and me just rambling and going on and on about my take on the game, my tips and tricks and what I think about certain things, my advice regarding getting off track and what's efficient, and my take on the ashes and status effects. So me using these tactics and using more different and different weapons later on in the game, I might get more into that again. I hope you enjoyed it. This was a point in my gameplay where I repeatedly failed. I thought I failed multiple times against the first big boss. Then, being there at the round table, I tried my luck multiple times against that wizard there in the big hallway, also failing multiple times. So I thought I was at the point where I could not progress quickly or just steamroll easily through the game as I was used up to that point. So I felt I needed to invest a little bit into collecting some items, some upgrading materials, collecting runes, collecting some weapons, and building my stats, my character. I spent lots of time going back and forth to the country of Elden Ring and farming and exploring, and then going back to the round table, leveling up my character and improving my equipment, my katana. So there's a huge gap in my recording from that point just now and my next video. So starting with my next video, there will be a huge gap of unrecorded gameplay. But I think my gameplay will get a lot more streamlined and possibly interesting. So I still hope you enjoyed watching me and listening to me, and I hope to see you again. Thank you for tuning in, and cheerio, goodbye.